Whether you've been a leader for 20 years or 20 minutes, you know the stress of wanting to be liked and wanting to be respected. So today I'm going to give you 3 very practical, very simple tips that will help you free yourself from that tension so that you can enjoy leadership and also build trust with your team. Welcome to Drama Free Teams, the show for leaders who care deeply and want their teams to thrive without the drama. I'm your host, Dr. Annie Campanile. Let's shift how you lead so you can stop dreading conflict and start driving results. When I started in my very first leadership role, which was a shift lead in Yellowstone Park at the Old Faithful Inn front desk, I wanted to learn, how can I be an effective leader? What is it that people need from me? That's a question that researchers keep looking at over and over again. And recently, the Gallup organization published their findings after looking at 52 different countries. This is so interesting. Even though it's important to have business acumen like financial accounting and budgeting and other tactical skills as a leader, what Gallup has found is that the 4 things that people want the most from their leaders are not so easy to put on a spreadsheet. The 4 common needs that followers all around the world want from their leaders are hope, trust, compassion, and stability. Hope, trust, compassion, and stability. All of those imply interpersonal relationships, interpersonal communication. That's why Drama Free Teams is focused on communication. Because whether you're communicating about something very tangible and practical like a budget, or something very intangible and challenging like conflict resolution, communication is at the core. So now that you're in this leadership role, you're going to be expected to communicate effectively in a range of different scenarios. If you want to build a firm foundation for yourself, build some stability for yourself to feel comfortable, happy, and confident as a leader, stay with me today because I will share 3 of my most effective tips that help you build that resilience and happiness and also effectiveness. All right, so our first tip comes from the pain I experienced as a leader and what I've seen happen over and over again to others. When you step into that leadership role, it's possible that your team has been without an effective leader for a long time. Some leaders avoid addressing problem behavior. They don't want to have those difficult conversations, or they don't know how. And so they put it off, they put it off, they put it off. Then when a new leader comes in, that leader's boss says, okay, now's the time, new leader. This person has a problem and you need to address it. Okay, so that's tricky, even if you're not a former peer. But if you were promoted from being a peer to a leader, this is additionally sensitive. And my recommendation to you is do not let yourself be pressured into holding a person accountable for some behavior until you have had a chance to be their leader and observe their behavior and document it yourself. You might have observed this behavior as a coworker, but that's different. If you have an accountability conversation with a new to you employee within the first month or 2 of your tenure as a leader, it's going to be very difficult to build trust with that person and possibly the team. When I was newly graduated from my MBA program, I took a position with a high-tech startup. And I was excited because this was a more advanced role. I was going to be a director of human resources. And I thought, hey, I've got this all figured out. This is when I was in my 30s. And even though I had been a leader before, I had not been a leader in a company of this intensity. So this was in 2000 when the high-tech bubble was happening and the environment was really intense. And I was coming from the hotel industry where it was very relational, and I helped people in Yellowstone have wonderful vacations. So I wanted a different experience, which led me go into that high-tech startup. But what I was not prepared for was to hold healthy boundaries as a leader. I wanted to please my executives. I wanted to show that I knew what I was doing, even though in many ways I didn't. I was still quite new in my career. In my first week as the director of human resources, the CEO of that small startup told me, hey, this person, your assistant, has been with us for 3 years. We cannot stand her. She's been a problem for the last 3 years. She brought her dog into the office when we were pouring new concrete, and the dog walked on the concrete. I couldn't believe he was telling me this. Like, when did that happen? 3 years ago. Okay. When did you talk to her about it? Well, we didn't want to make a scene. We really needed her help, so we haven't talked to her about it. And then he proceeded to tell me several examples of other pretty egregious errors that this employee had made over the previous 3 years. It was clear to me that he was angry, he was frustrated, and he expected me to address it. Okay, so as I'm meeting with him, I can feel my body getting more and more anxious. It was hard for me to pause and take a breath. I hadn't built those skills yet. And so my mind was kind of racing. My energy started racing. I now know it's because I was going into that fight or flight state. But at that time, I didn't understand that. I just thought, ooh, this is a problem. And this is a chance for me to really show that I know what I'm doing. I didn't pause to think about the ripple effect on my reputation as a leader if I held this one person accountable for behaviors I had not observed. Within a couple of days, I had a meeting with her. I reviewed these problematic errors she had made and behaviors. Boy, did she get mad. I don't blame her at all. She was surprised. She was shocked. She was upset. And here I am, the messenger, who really doesn't have any reason to be telling her this. Yes, technically I was her leader, but I hadn't observed any of that behavior. I didn't have any kind of relationship with her yet. I can tell you that after that conversation, she went back to her peers and talked about how unfair her leader, Annie, was. And I never recovered my reputation. I never recovered the chance to build trust with the rest of the team in that startup. It ended up being an environment I didn't want to stay in. And so about a year later, I left that organization. But that experience really stayed with me because I thought, you know what? That was unfair of me to hold her accountable to behaviors that I hadn't observed. And it was unfair of the CEO to ask me to do that. So my first recommendation to you, whether you're new in your leadership role or you were promoted from peer to leader, my first recommendation to you is don't let yourself be pressured into holding a person accountable until you have had a chance to observe their behavior as their leader and document it for yourself and hold the appropriate accountability conversations. If your leader pushes you and pressures you like my former CEO did, it's a chance for you to pause, take a breath, feel your feet on the floor so you can calm your own survival response. And then if you can have the courage to say, you know, I don't think it's fair if I hold that person accountable to something I have not observed. If you, leader, if you, my boss, want to hold that conversation and you want me present, I will be present. But I don't think it's appropriate that I hold them accountable when I haven't observed the behavior. I do acknowledge that that takes courage. But guess what? You're setting a boundary with your own leader, a really healthy boundary to say, look, I'm not going to take responsibility for gaps in leadership that might have happened before I arrived. What I will do is observe behavior, document it, have the appropriate conversations going forward. My next tip will help you accomplish what we just covered, and that is educate yourself, continually educate yourself. If your organization has some leadership development classes, take them, make the time. If they don't, then I've got a couple of books listed in today's show notes that I really love and recommend to you. One of them is titled Your First Leadership Job. Even if it's not your first leadership job, I think that book is an excellent resource. You don't have to read it cover to cover. It has lots of different scenarios that can support you if you come across challenging scenarios or you just want to be the best leader that you can be. Now, my next tip has to do with how you talk to yourself. Talking to your employees, talking to your own leader, talking to your other stakeholders requires skill that you will develop over the course of your career. Talking to yourself is a skill that many people ignore or don't even think about. They just talk to themselves by default. That's what I call it. There's always a soundtrack of me talking to myself, about what's going to happen, about what it means if I made a mistake. If you allow that soundtrack to run on its own, it will be driven by fear, and you will start to hold yourself responsible for your employees' happiness. Anytime they're unhappy, you're going to get that jolt of fight or flight. Your body's going to go into survival mode, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? But guess what? You are not responsible for your employees' happiness. I'm going to say that again. You are not responsible for your employees' happiness. They are. What you are responsible for is building your leadership skills, building your communication skills, and bringing yourself to your team and to your job as authentically as possible. Build your wisdom, share who you really are, and then let everybody be responsible for their own happiness. I thought about this a lot during another leadership role where I had a team reporting to me that had been together for 5 years before I joined the organization. Pretty quickly on, I learned that one of those employees had a habit of every so often completely exploding, throwing F-bombs around this professional office, slamming doors. And I could tell the team was a little bit nervous about it happening again. And they were like kind of dropping hints. They didn't ever specifically talk to me about, hey, this is going to happen. What are you going to do? But it came up enough in a joking way, like, oh, I wonder when she's going to explode again, that I took that as a sign of, hey, I better prepare. How am I going to respond when this employee lashes out? So one day I was meeting with that employee and she was kind of angry and frustrated about something. And I was trying to understand. And it quickly became clear to me that she was blaming me for all of the different things that she was frustrated about in her job, even though she had been frustrated about those things way before I joined. So I looked at her and I said, I think it's really important that we get clear about something. And she said, well, yeah, I agree. You are responsible for my happiness. She beat me to it. Literally, she said, you are responsible for my happiness. And I took a breath and I said, actually, I need to let you know that I am not taking responsibility for your happiness. Only you can be responsible for your happiness. I'm responsible for being the best leader that I can be, for making sure you have resources, for making sure I communicate clearly. But at the end of the day, your happiness is your responsibility. And then I paused and I took deep breaths because I didn't know what would happen next. What happened was that she didn't lash out. She didn't explode. She actually got really quiet. I think she had never heard that from anyone before. I had the impression that she was not used to people saying no to her because they were afraid of her exploding. Well, guess what? I wasn't afraid. I was prepared to hold a very firm boundary and tell her this is not acceptable if she exploded. Because I had that confidence, I was able to have that conversation with her about happiness and stay very grounded. I wasn't in fight or flight. I was in my own certainty of saying, I want you to be happy, and I will do my best to provide the environment and the resources to help you do that. And then in the end, you are responsible for what you do with that. You are responsible for your own happiness. So again, the 3 tips are, number 1, don't let yourself be pressured into holding anyone accountable if you have not had time as their leader to observe their behavior. Number 2, continually educate yourself and learn how to be an effective leader. And number 3, talk to yourself on purpose. Remind yourself you are not responsible for anyone else's happiness. There are so many other tips and tricks that I'm excited to share with you to help you become a trauma-informed, compassionate leader who protects yourself from burnout and who's able to resolve team drama when it shows up. You can do all of that. All you need is your authentic presence, your ability to calm your survival response when it shows up, and a few communication strategies. Something that will really help is to build your own leadership presence. It's commonly called executive presence, but you don't have to have an executive title in order to cultivate leadership presence. I have a fabulous free executive presence starter kit for you, which includes a full-length video of my live masterclass called Demystifying Executive Presence. And it includes really great practical tips that are fun and that you can apply right away. Click the link in today's show notes for the Executive Presence Starter Kit. Next time, I'll answer one of the most painful questions leaders ask me. How can I be myself at work without it being used against me? You're strong and direct. Your leaders respect that. But now you're being told you lack empathy or you come across as intimidating to others. I'll show you why authenticity can feel risky and share the secret to being yourself without fear, so you can lead boldly and bring out the best in people instead of their defenses. Until then, I'm Dr. Annie Campanile, reminding you that thriving in leadership is possible and you don't have to do it alone. See you next time.